Hi, I'm Jess, and this is my audience. The case that I'm presenting about is called The Chase. By hearing the title of the case, I bet you could assume what it's about. It's basically about an officer that is sitting at an intersection at 2 o'clock in the morning and just thinking about going to sleep, wanting to go home, whatnot. And out of nowhere, a car speeds through the intersection running a red light. And they're sitting there watching the car for a few seconds, thinking the driver must be doing at least 80 miles per hour. So you, as an officer, leave your parking spot and begin pursuing the automobile. You call down to the station and let them know what you're doing. As you begin to catch up with the car, you hit 90 miles per hour. And then as you begin to get closer and closer, you put your spotlight on the car. And then the car begins to brake and pull over. And so as the car pulls over, you get behind the car. You start to get out of the car and then come up to the person that you pulled over. As you begin to walk towards the car speeds off and goes away. So then you get back into your cruiser and you start to follow the person again. Well, as you're following the person, they start to drive a little bit erratically, which makes you assume that they're drinking and driving. And while they're erratically driving, they're going 100 miles per hour, 115 miles per hour, and it just keeps going up from there. Cars on each side of the road are getting thrown off, and bad stuff's happening while you're chasing them. So you call for backup. Well, backup hasn't come just yet as the car's speeding up. So at the end of the case, it basically gives you a choice. What do? You chase or you don't chase? There's two different courses of action that you can take in this case. You can either continue to chase the car and take the chances of hurting someone or bystander, hurting yourself or hurting the person driving, or you could just call off the chase and just call out to other officers, other departments, and let them know a very vivid description of the car that you're chasing. If the officer chose to continue the chase in this situation, it would probably not be the best idea for the officer. There are many negative points that fall into the officer continuing the chase. One being that the officer would be putting not only their own life at stake, but a bystander's life at stake, and the person who's driving, the person that they're chasing's life at stake. The only real benefit the officer will get out of the whole situation is for themselves, for the adrenaline rush, all that. That's the only possible benefit for this situation if they continue the chase. Other than that, they're just risking their own life and everyone around them. On the other hand, stopping the chase can be a way more effective and beneficial situation for the officer and the people in the city and everyone around, and even the person driving. For the officer, losing the person and wishing they caught that person, it would only be a negative side of that for them. Stopping the chase would eliminate anyone getting hurt, or at least anyone getting hurt because of the officer. It would probably just make the perp go home and stop speeding. Typically in situations like that, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, it's probably a drunk driver just trying to get home as quickly as possible. Stopping the chase would save a lot of bad things from happening. And if you stop the chase, I doubt the person wants to still be out there driving around and doing stupid stuff. I bet they want to go home after the fact because they don't want to get pulled over again or get in trouble. So after reading this and everything, I interviewed 3 police officers. One of the police officers that I interviewed his name was David Lange, and another police officer was Mike Casey, and then the third one was Roy Frost. The first question that I asked the officers is, I asked, what would you do in this situation? Dave Lange responded to me saying that his personal actions would be that because of the fresh pursuit doctrine, you have the ability to continue to follow the vehicle outside of your jurisdiction. However, doing what is responsible and proper is your highest priority, and using your direct discretion. He said he would have called off as much information about the vehicle as possible. This includes the make, the model, the year, the color, and damage, if any, on the car. Direction, and most important, plate number if you can get it. And in this situation, the plate number was not eligible at all because there was mud on the plate, so if there was like maybe a number or two that he could have gotten, Dave suggested that that would be a good idea. This officer would have broken off the pursuit and put a be on the lookout on the vehicle with all the details about the car going out on the surrounding towns in minutes. The second officer that I interviewed was Mike Casey. He's an MIT officer, and the first officer is actually a Shirley officer. Mike Casey's response to my first question was that in this situation, as have happened to him many times, the smart decision for the department and the public would be to call as good of a description as there is and give your location and end the chase. He says that nothing good is going to come out of high-speed accident. The scenario talks of a high-speed chase, he says. If you were following a car that's doing 40 miles per hour or 50 miles per hour, it is safe to follow. And then follow him home with your lights on and your sirens on. No matter what your decision is, you have to listen to your boss, and he is not in the chase and is not ramped up like you are. So he basically describes how the adrenaline rush can really get to you and really make you want to continue this chase and continue following the perp and catch the perp just for your own satisfaction. But for the bystanders and for your life and everyone around you, it's better for you to just stop it as a whole. And then the third officer, Roy Frost, he's the deputy chief of Billerica Police Department. His response to my first question I asked was, in the situation, he would have giving the best description of the car possible, including any plate number I was able to get from the initial approach when the vehicle pulled over. With that information, he would have likely ended the pursuit once he made a decision. The benefit of continuing the pursuit overweighed by risk it but placed on himself, the public, and the operant of the fleeing vehicle. So once again, it's still a situation where the risk overweighed the benefit of getting the person. He says that likely that decision would have been made the moment he began to approach a populated area or where he observed other vehicular traffic on secondary roadways. Because the scenario does not provide a lot of description with respect of the area being patrolled, he is assuming that the area was pretty remote and uninhabited at the time of night. Vehicular pursuits are strictly regulated in law enforcement due to the documented risks surrounding these incidents. All of the officers for this question had very similar answers. Most of my questions that I did ask, they had similar answers. They all agreed that the chase should stop, not continue, because they all agreed that a bystander's life and their life and the person who's driving life is a lot more important than getting an arrest. They agreed that it would be likely that if the person was intoxicated, it would be more likely that the person would just be going home and they wouldn't be out still. And if they were out still, it would be hopes that the police officers that are out in different towns or in that town would possibly catch them from the description said over the radio. Let's see. So the second question that I asked these officers was, in your own experience, do you think it is likely that the person driving the erratic vehicle will just go home? The first officer, David Lange, responded saying, in his own experience at the time, it is likely that the person would just be on their way home if they were intoxicated and would most likely continue home. He explained to me that if the person began to run off, like they did in the case study, that then the person was probably just intoxicated and did not want to get a DUI. But there are also some cases where the person is hiding something much larger. In this situation, David said he did not think it was a case where the person had something to hide because they originally pulled over the person probably pulled away and they didn't want to get caught because they smelled like alcohol or something like that. It wasn't a case of it being someone that was fleeing or something like that, like fleeing jail or whatnot, like a criminal. It wouldn't be something like that because they would just continue driving away. They wouldn't have stopped originally. They just must have switched their idea and was not wanted anything to do with it. The second officer, Mike Casey, responded to this question, stating that if the person is drunk, he will most likely just go home. Given the circumstances of the situation and experience, this officer explained that it is likely to assume that the person driving the vehicle is intoxicated. Also, given the time of night and the driver that the driver was driving at it, is likely to consider that the person would just be going home. Nothing is open at 2 in the morning, and most people do not drive around and drink at that time. I mean, you can't really tell what people do when they drive around and drink, but from his own experience, it's less likely that people are just going to be driving around getting drunk. And then the third officer, Roy Frost, answered this question, saying in his own experience, the operator would most likely go home, especially if he was just intoxicated. The home is always considered the safest place for someone to retreat into, is what he said. There is a feeling amongst many that as considered the safest place for someone to retreat into, as long as they make it home, that the police cannot do anything and the police cannot catch them at all. He said, as a career in law enforcement always proves, is that there is always tomorrow that we will most likely come across the individual again. So he's basically stating that, granted, getting upset about not being able to catch the person, there's most likely a day that will come where he will bump into that person once again. My opinion was the person will probably go home as well. Knowing people that have drank and driven and whatnot, they just tend to just go home. No one wants to be out driving and drinking. It's not a smart idea. People know that. I think everyone should know that. Once again, all the officers did agree on their questions. It's everything that I asked them is all the same, not the same answers, but different answers with the same type of idea, pretty much. The third question that I asked is, if you continued the chase, do you think you would have eventually caught the driver? David Lange responded saying, if I continued the chase, it is most likely that it would have resulted in an accident or possibly a fatality. I do not count that as a win or catching the driver. It is interest of preserving life. It is best to use all of the tools you have at your disposal to catch the driver. Mike Casey also responded to this question saying, when you are involved in a car chase, the adrenaline takes over and you make a bad decision and stupid mistakes. There are so many choices you have if the operator is a fleeing felon. What is the felony? He says. If serious, can I endanger the public or make it a big arrest? And he responds to his question saying, no. You will not be considered a hero if you have a dead or injured innocent bystander. If you are chasing a marathon bomber, a murderer that everyone is looking for, a perp that you have personal knowledge just shot somebody and is likely to shoot again, then you better get your game on, he says. He said he's been involved with this, and when you start to pit and spin, maneuvers and other techniques, you cannot turn back the clock and start again. It can get hairy. It does not matter if you continue to chase that car, you could get into an accident and become seriously disabled or dead. The third officer, Roy Frost, responded to this question saying, if we continue to chase the suspect, it is likely we would apprehend the driver. However, it would likely be at the scene of a serious accident. It is not uncommon for individuals to crash shortly after fleeing from police. Unfortunately, this often includes the individual crashing into innocent civilians. We often also see police cruisers getting seriously damaged from pursuit. And that's when he brings up that police cruisers are very expensive. So risking getting that into an accident could be a burden upon the department itself. Personally, I do think that they would maybe catch them, but I agree with all the officers. It would end up in an accident or something would go wrong. Continuing the chase can financially be destroying for the police station, as Roy Frost said. As Officer Frost said in my interview, they are very expensive. For example, I was reading an article about a police station that was getting new cars because Ford discontinued the Crown Victoria cruisers. In the article, it states the city of Fairfield purchased four Ford Police Interceptor all-wheel drive utility vehicles early in the month at the price of $105,960, and that price included the base cost, which is $25,000 per vehicle, plus $5,000 just for a specialized police package that included protective screens and mounts for laptops. Fatally crashing a police car can cause the town damage repairs, which the town will have to pay for that as well, and then it can cost the police department a lot of money, as you can tell by those cruisers and how expensive they are. Just for four, it was $105,000. Not only is continuing the chase a financial issue, it is also a safety issue. Continuing can result in possibly killing bystanders or losing an officer. Not only the officer can get hurt, but the people around the area. For example, in Mass, there was an incident where a state trooper was chasing a man who had been driving a stolen car. I think he stole it from Vermont. He actually had a rifle that was stolen in the car as well. He ended up getting off the intersection because they were on the highway, and he went right into another car. He hurt the driver of the car, but the person who was in the passenger seat actually died. So that was on the officer partially, and partially on the person driving the stolen car. After knowing all of that information that I just explained, in the situation of my case, I would not continue this chase. It would be ethically wrong to continue the chase just for my own gain and my own personal excitement. It has too many risk factors that play into it. Preserving life is a lot more important than chasing someone and getting an arrest. It is not worth it. It's not worth hurting someone. There's also a lot of, not laws, but a lot of, I guess you could say laws in the police force for themselves when it comes to pursuit and chase and whatnot. If I was the officer in the situation and I was chasing the person, and I killed someone because I was chasing someone, that would live on me forever, and I wouldn't be able to live with myself. So, no, I would not continue the chase. It's just not worth the fatality, and it's not worth hurting the people around me. And that is the end of my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
So, Jessica, just to confirm, the juice isn't worth the squeeze when it comes to a car chase.
No, right? It's not. I mean, for the officer himself, it can slightly be exciting and exhilarating, but in the situation and in the case, it's not worth getting hurt over because, the excitement can be fun at the time, but if you crash yourself and you die, the excitement wasn't worth it. You hurt way too many people.
So you had 3 veteran police officers say it's just not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they agree with your position on chasing, a car chase, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They agree that it would be not worth it, and they would eventually catch the perp. Like Mike Casey said, if it was someone like the marathon bomber, then that's something that is worth chasing the person. But if it's a case where the person's intoxicated and not a felon or something like that, it's just not worth it at all.
It's not a big deal.
No, not a big deal. Not a big loss. It may be at the time, but after the fact and thinking about what's going on, it's not worth the loss of humans around you and yourself.
It's not worth the consequences.
No, not at all. All right.
Very good presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.